Cool. Uh, Good evening, everybody. Right. Welcome to this panel. This is a very hot topic. We have been hearing about this from the start of this session. I can tell you, like, I have seen the evolution of AI for the last 20 years. Right. 10 years back, when you used to pitch AI to the business leaders, the question was why. Now the question comes the other way around: why not? Right? So that's how things have changed. And as adoption has increased like anything, like in the last 2 years, what we have seen is the breadth of POCs, right? You know, what are the use cases that can be enabled and et cetera, et cetera. Now it's about production, right? Things are on its own. And that's when trust becomes so very important. It's not only about accuracy, but trust. Because you are giving out data, large amount of data, to models which are not so deterministic, not completely deterministic, right? So what are the boundaries, right? How trust gets defined? The traditional architectures need to be redefined, and it cannot be sitting in just a policy document or just a software patch on top of already something developed. It has to be part of the overall architecture in itself. And that's what we are going to cover today in that panel, and we're going to unravel the mystery. We have an excellent panel. We have Harsh from Cars24, right, you know, who leads the regulation and the compliance, and will give us all those perspectives from that point of view. And we obviously have Vijay, right, who will give the technologist's perspective on that. So with that, welcome, gentlemen, and we'll start with the question to you, Harsh, right? You know, you have been dealing with, you know, consumer data, right, and providing various services. And I can tell from an AI practitioner's point of view, right, data is gold for AI, right? Yes. So you have data of the past history of the consumer, and you can train models. It leads to a lot of innovation. But then there, how do you make sure that there is a boundary of this data which is limited to the purpose, right? Or not breaking the limit of the purpose for which the data was collected, right? So what kind of guardrails you think, and what kind of challenges you think that people will have to deal with, and what are your take on this? What is your take on this?
Sure. No, thank you, Trideb, and thanks everyone for coming over. Pleasure to be here. I think one which I want to touch upon before I address you is, you know, the white paper which just got released. I think this white paper has itself evolved not from where the DPDP Act, when they never, I think, considered that AI will take up so much, that the way they have evolved, that it was purpose, it was, you know, usage of information, and now suddenly the third person who's creating models, and you don't know really the purpose has suddenly dissolved. And I think, I'm assuming, I'll read through this paper, and I'm sure we'll have this panel already answered this, they have addressed. But I think the way we have been treating data, I think as a fast-growing startup, and now, you know, auto tech and a fintech now we are, like you said, data is gold. Building on our models, I think by you know, just collecting and reusing it for different set of use cases. Thankfully, when the act came in place, and I think what we have done in last 6-7 months is just one, sensitizing our people that, you know, sorry, if you have data, you doesn't have a right to do anything and everything. And thankfully, you know, this, like Samrat sir said, 250 crore is a big enough implication for a good regulated company to understand that, yeah, this is serious. What we have done over the past few months is just trying to minimize the data, trying to make sure that the use case which we are collecting is kind of addressed. We have really kind of creating our own consent framework. You know, we've been trying to work with ID5, but again, maybe it's something which we want to internalize. So the framework which we are designing internally kind of takes care of, the purpose, the bedrocks of what the DPDP Act is. So I think effort is on. Suddenly the new layer comes in, which is AI. And now I think we again are now rethinking that how does the derived data, I never said my customer that, your data will be used to give you a finance or an insurance or, serve you the car. But sorry, this data, my model has learned by giving you the algorithm, the price of the car, but it has your, feed. They obviously doesn't know that it's whether Hirsch's data or it's Tridip's data, but it has the data of maybe a WagonR is getting sold or some car and what should be the model of this car and then the longevity and everything. So I think that's where we'll have to figure out a balance. I think it's tough. It's still work in progress, trying to learn, trying to figure out with the AI providers, how do I kind of mitigate that. But generally, what we would also try to do is, and this is something which we were discussing as recent as last week, that how do I control the model itself, that it learns the basics, but it doesn't really kind of go beside what is not required. Go give me the parameters which is required, but again, not going personal, not going, it just has to be a learning layer. It cannot be breaching the data. And that's what I'm thinking about. I'm happy to hear your thoughts.
Thank you about that. So basically, some kind of model architecture innovation has to come out, right, to make sure the data purpose is solved, right? Vijay, with that, my question is that some of these models might have already gotten developed, right? Yeah. And data, I think there was a question, right? The data might already been collected, right? And it's residing. And today, because of the capabilities of the model, right, with Gen AI coming in, right, there is a lot of unstructured data also, like scanned images lying in the ecosystem and so on and so forth. So, what is your take, right, in terms of how discovery becomes a very, very important aspect, and what are the challenges, and how AWS is thinking about these challenges in general? So, would be happy to hear you.
Sure, Tridip. So I like to give this analogy, especially when we talk about data and AI. Think of it like a skyscraper, okay? What do we all like about skyscrapers? Usually the view at the top, right? Like, so AI is like the view from the top. So everyone likes it. It's like, yeah, you want to use it, you want to try it, you want to do new things. Who's looking at the foundation? To me, data is the foundation. Right? Like, so if you don't have a strong data foundation, then you're really not going to win in AI. Right? And data foundation starts fundamentally with data discovery. You first need to know what is there in your systems, in your organization, before you can start doing anything with it. Right? And what is there includes sensitive data, PII data, data scattered across different systems. So it's very important to streamline that first. Right, so that becomes top priority, and we put a lot of emphasis, to that, right, in terms of how you're discovering data and streamlining it, right. Second thing is in terms of classifying. So not all data is the same in terms of its importance. So a public record or a public file is not the same as a customer KYC document. Right. Like, so something that you put on your website is fine; it's public information. But customer KYC has to be treated differently. So you need to have different tiers of categorizing data, okay? And third, and again, very importantly in this era of AI, like what Harsh was saying, is explainability, right? So how do you explain data? You need to be able to trace data, the lineage, to really talk about how you arrived at what you arrived at, okay? So these three things become super important from a data standpoint, and I would really put a lot of emphasis to that, right? Like, it becomes very, very important.
So some kind of a lineage framework and a data taxonomy framework that has to be defined based on, the importance of the data, whether it is PII and not, right? And then accordingly discover the data in your ecosystem, and then accordingly like purge it, right? Whatever is in the importance. I
Exactly.
think it's a great insight, and I'm sure, right, everybody is taking note of all of these things. Thank you. So one other point I have, so this is data which is collected internally, right?
Yes.
Now with large language models, frontier models, LLMs, GenAI, whatever you want to call it, right? You know, people are hitting APIs which are outside of the organization, right? It's cloud API, right? You know, the model APIs, right? And being a cloud provider, what kind of measures do you take to make sure that whatever data is coming, first of all, right, it's not getting utilized to enrich the model further, right? Because that beats the original purpose of the data, definitely. And second of all, what kind of other observability you have in general, right? And what is that overall data lineage ecosystem that you are creating? We're very eager to hear about that.
Sure, and that's a very popular question. I think someone also asked a similar question, right, in terms of what's happening to my data. And I think we have to start with first principles, right? So earlier, if you think about it, there was this mindset that, okay, I had a set perimeter, like a digital perimeter, and if data goes outside, I have a risk. Those models have changed. Why? Because data is now everywhere. Data could be with a cloud provider, SaaS provider, could be with a partner, could be sitting anywhere, right? Like, so then what is the notion of control? So the thing to look at it is control has to be wherever data is. Right? Control has to flow with data. Okay, it is not a set boundary. It has to flow with data. And how does one do that? You can think of things like tokenization, masking, encryption. Right? Those kind of things allow you to access data securely and still control data irrespective of where it resides. Right? I think that's the first thing to keep in mind. And at least from an AWS example, I can tell you, since we're talking of AI and models using AI to train, etc., we have a service called Bedrock. Bedrock is a platform where we bring a whole host of models to your environment for you to use those models. I'm talking of frontier models. And the way Bedrock is set up is that the data that is used for you to build is not used to train the model. Right? Like in some sense, instead of your data going to the model, we bring the model to you. Right? Like that's the first thing. I would go beyond, right? I think you need to look at this to see how do I trust, but how do I verify, right? Like it is very important to trust, but still verify in these environments because, see, we are, I think, gone past risk areas like cybercrime. I think we fairly, I think we have evolved in terms of how we address that. I think the new areas of risk are things like oversharing data with AI, right? Like, because people tend to overshare data, especially in a company environment. And shadow AI, I know which Sri Samrat spoke about. Like, there are multiple AI systems sitting within the company which the company itself doesn't know. Okay. Third is, I really feel there is something called inference risk. What is that? Is that the AI, even though you might not be sharing sensitive data, can still interpret and assume certain sensitive data basis what you're giving inputs, right? Like, so those are the kind of things that which currently we need to address, which are way beyond what was there in the past.
Fantastic. I think taking that point forward, Harsh, right, you know, I'm sure, right, you must be using these APIs so you are on the other side of the spectrum, right? So it would be important to hear your views, right, from a compliance point of view. How do you make sure what data is going into these APIs when it is getting hit, right? And what kind of insights that are getting generated, right? You know, those insights might actually be very sensitive, which was not the purpose for which the data was sent, but it got generated because of the capability of these models. And it's hidden sometimes, right? So how do you make sure what kind of guardrails you provide and what kind of measurement you have that whether the model is performing the way it should perform, whether it's in the privacy boundaries and so on and so forth, right? It would be great to hear from you.
Sure. See, I think what I want to touch upon is there was a data which was collected from the customer, and there was a purpose for which, and maybe the AI actually served me for that purpose, gave me the insight. But what also has happened over this getting the insight is that now AI has created the inference, like he said, of that particular person or of that cohort, which is more than what ideally a person would have given.
Right.
And then there is an inference which will now draw from that to my future searches and future codings, and there is like that perpetuality of context being there, and we use Claude very heavily. Like, I think, I'm not sure if people follow Cars24 is just left, right, and center on the AI and how we want to like really build and simplify the whole consumer journey. But what we have done is obviously we took the consent from the customer to process a certain purpose, which may be of any of the sort of our business. But what we have not done is, have I gone and told customer, sorry, I did this, I've got an inference that you may be a high risk for me, or you may be, a fraud risk. That was not something which was supposed to be, drawn. But I think, again, the guardrails, if like you said, Hridev, I think what we do is obviously not sharing any PI. We try and make sure that the variable data, it's more context which we give, which we are generating, because being auto tech plus fintech, we do quite a lot of lending and insurance underwriting and everything. So what we do is generalize the outcome. What we are trying to do, feed in the data with our AIs, is also just building better cohorts from the generalizing it. So definitely no data sharing, no, obviously personal is something which we anyways has barred, but it's just the context which we are keep giving back to our Claude and to our ChatGPT codes, and which basically helps us drive. Like I said earlier, I am not sure that even though with that context, that model is going to be used by Claude as an LLM with someone else, because that's just the machine. Even though we have an enterprise and everything, and they say that, but there is somewhere. And I'll give you an example. I was in a meeting with Jayesh, who's the CFO of Infosys, last week. We have just got him on board on our board as an independent director. And I was just speaking to him about what's Infosys thought on AI. And they're like, I am not sharing any of my data. Neither my customers, Fortune 500, are right now aligned that they would want us to work on AI. Because very clearly, that's my intelligence, and I don't want that model to replicate, even though they say that it is there, inferences are still drawn.
Right.
So someone like Infosys, if they are saying that, because there is an inherent risk of model capturing, and I came back and I was speaking to my CTO about the same, that, my risk intelligence, my underwriting intelligence, my algorithms for car pricing is somewhere drawing all of this reference. How do I make sure that it remains with us? It's something which USP have created. No answers yet, again, but what we can do is just ensure PIs, just ensure the purpose is clear. Obviously, there is purpose and beyond, which happens by default. I will not ask. I think AI will give me more than what I have asked, and it helps, honestly. But it's just that limitation of really being sensitive, just giving those codes. Guardrail as such, as of today, like again, I'll repeat, I am not sharing personal data. I'm not sharing anything beyond my consent. I'm not trying to share. I'm being very restrictive on the purpose of, just trying to ensure what is there. But again, like I said, the outcomes are much more than what I'm asked. So that is something which we'll have to figure out how to go about it.
Yeah. So, but I think a couple of interesting points you mentioned, right? One is be as sovereign as possible, right? Instead of giving the data out, right? And second of all, even with sovereign, An AI, right? AI can come up with some
Model,
insights
yeah.
that is way beyond the expectation, right? And good for the platform, not good for the individuals, right? Or the privacy and the trust angle of it, right? So I think that's the balance that needs to be met. But you mentioned about generalized intelligence versus individualized intelligence. I think so. Essentially, what you are pointing towards is that the more and more the intelligence is generalized and you can track that, right? It's better instead of individual level intelligence, right? And you cannot connect back the individual to the generalized intelligence. That's an interesting insight. Thank you. Um, uh, I just want to change the perspective a little bit right now, right? We have
Sure.
been talking about calling AI models and getting an answer. So there is a prompt and we are getting some answer and so on and so forth. Nowadays, we are talking about going beyond automation and towards autonomy, right? With agentic AI, right? It's not, again, a single model getting utilized, but you have multiple agents which are intricately connected and they are autonomously not only predicting something or getting some intelligence, but they are making decisions, right? And acting upon them,
Yeah.
right? So the audit trail, if single model is a problem, then in this kind of a system, it goes anywhere, right? So what is your take on this, right?
Yeah.
Vijay, just to start with you, right? How do you measure this?
Yeah.
Right? You can't measure using just an accuracy or things like that. So what are the challenges over here?
Yeah, I think we are clearly in the agentic era. There is no doubt. There is no doubt. It is only going to accelerate. I think the more that we embrace it, set the right level of guardrails, governance, and start using it more actively, the more results are going to come. That's the first thing. Second, I think it needs a very important balance between autonomy and accountability. Okay?
Right.
So I think it's a very important thing to think about because it's not like you just let agents run and let them do what they want. It's not like that. Nor at the other end say that I'll govern every single thing that an agent does. Okay, so if you go in the direction where you go on the side of I'll give them a lot of autonomy, you run risk. If you go on the side where I will literally micromanage the agent and so on, you run the risk of going slow. Okay, so you need to achieve a right balance, right? And we really feel that the balance is achieved by having governance not as an overlay, but as a part of your architecture. As you're building, governance has to be embedded. It cannot be an afterthought. Right? It has to be in the architecture in terms of multiple ways. I mean, like your identity access management, your encryption, your controls, your guardrails, right? All of it, especially centering around responsible AI, it's very, very important to set that up front. Okay, and that's really how one builds it. The second thing one can learn from is in terms of tiered risks. Okay, so for actions, agentic actions which are of low risk, allow a higher level of autonomy because you would be able to come back. For actions which are medium risk, have a certain level of human supervision. For actions which are high risk, for sure have a new human supervising that and signing off. Right? You do see this tiered risk across financial services. Banks are used to this tiered risk model. You just use the same framework for AI as well. Right? Like that's really how we have seen successful organizations employing AI do this really well in terms of how they're approaching this. Right? That's the other thought that I want to leave. I think the last thing I want to say is, I think it's very important to look at governance not as a tax on innovation. Right? Actually, governance lets one build systems very responsibly. Okay? So in the sense that if you build it right by embedding governance in the architecture, then every time you are launching something new, you don't have to start from scratch. You
Correct.
build the basic systems. You don't have to rewrite and get it checked every single time and with every single item the checklist from scratch. Because you build the layer and you know that whatever you build is along, within those guardrails. So that's the mental model to look at governance, and that's the thought I just want to leave with everyone. Yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you. Harsh, from the other side, right, when you are creating all of these agents, right? I'm sure you are also creating agentic. Everybody is doing that, right? How are you making sure that accountability, as Vijay mentioned, right, is maintained, right? And who is accountable for what, right? Especially from a system point of view.
Yeah, I think clearly agents are coded by a human to simplify our life or to kind of streamline our life. The sudden model of having a people to now AI agents is because it just makes life easier for someone. And then there is someone human who's actually coding or who's kind of creating that. I think in all purposes, the human accountability will never or should not cease to exist. I think that's very important that because it's ultimately machine who's actioning on behalf of the person. And in fact, with the agents, it's more autonomy being given to a machine to instruct, to create, to call customers. And then there is a certain action which has happened because your agents are empowered enough to do it. But again, the accountability remains with the action owner, which is important. If I'm doing, and like he said, we do risk monitoring in a financial world, and we have a lending business again, where I do like each customer AML risk monitoring. And because of the rules set in with my agent, now this has become much easier to categorize it on a daily onboarding, and I know end of the day there is. But really, would you really want to depend completely on that, or would you want to do like some sort of sample check? As a human, as my responsibility for that act, why wouldn't I do like a cross check? Maybe whether the machine is learning and whether the machine has to evolve, because again, every day we are evolving with something or the other, with new regulations coming in. So I think a human accountability remains, and I would really think that way. Plus, I think what is important, which I've done at least, is agents again makes life easier, and there is someone who's designing that flow. Why wouldn't they not involve, let's say, someone like a compliance or a DPO for you,
right,
to imbibe the whole learning or the design journey with compliance and governance in mind. And they should just, like how I used to sign off on the products at one point, highlight the regulatory risk, what should be done this way, or there is a risk. I think now what we have done is, it's actually day one when we are sitting, I'll be actually there in the room to figure it out, that, okay, what are we solving with AI today? And I would know, what data are you taking today? Which answers the previous question, that I'm there to be ensuring that accountability and whether there is a right set of data. And with agents, and we have gone live with 90% of our calling is happening through AI, is that the matrix which we have put in, is their language is being coercive? Are the agents who's calling, what sort of each note which they go through, I've vetted personally and would like approve it. Because I know it's not person calling. Person may have like a sudden impatience or a sudden change of tone, but AI will not have that way. Obviously, AI has the inference and reference of tone, mood, language, everything, but it will only do what I've told. So I think design phase is again where a regulatory person should kind of get involved while designing these agents. And I am sure, and I can see it right away, that agents are going to be already a big thing. And I think it's important that we design from scratch, but with complete governance. We know now what DPDP Act requires us to do. Why not just do it at the start? So yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I think it's we can go on and on, right, with this discussion, right? And I'm sure people will have a lot of questions. But I just want to end it with a couple of rapid fires, right? So
sure.
If you have to invest on one thing and you have 4 options, right? Which one will you select, right? AI governance, data governance, DPDP compliance, and cybersecurity.
I think it will be data governance, right? I think just echoing the point that is said, data governance is fundamental. I think of it this way. Cybersecurity is about how you're securing your systems. DPDP is about how you're protecting your rights. AI governance is about how you're controlling outcomes. But data governance is fundamental to all these three.
Yeah.
If you don't have your data right, we know this thing that we have learned from school, right? Garbage in, garbage out. If your data is not right, then whatever you get is not going to work. So you have to set this right, and there is no two ways about it.
Great. Harsh?
No, completely aligned. I think there is no two-way because, like, when we started implementing DPDP, what the first stage of implementation was clean up your data, make it sensible, make it at one place. You should know where all data do you have. So I think that's again a bedrock because no model works without the data. No model works where they don't have a context. So data governance, and I think this is something which hopefully will not evolve. This is going to be the bedrock of any new org which is coming in or the established orgs. Like Samrat also mentioned, it's the data which, even at the government level, like they have to organize it. So I think that's definitely no two ways about it. So yeah.
Well, thank you very much, right? It was really enlightening, right? And I took out a lot of things for myself. Definitely, I'm sure everybody has, right? But to call out certain things, right? I think it's a people, process, and platform problem.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
That how do you come up with the architecture? We have heard about how the sensitivity needs to be tiered, how accountability needs to be tiered, and how this can be matched properly, right?
Yeah.
From sensibility to accountability, right? We have heard about models, how models need to be evolved further to take care of certain things from what data it is utilizing and so on and so forth, right? And we have heard about how organizations, the people in the organization need to work together. We hardly think of compliance or legal team coming during the design phase of a technology solution, right? But it's the need of the hour, right? To be compliant, to make sure how things are put together. Thank you very much for all of these insights, right?
Yeah.
I'll open the floor for question.
Sure.
Hello, sir. So this is Vishal, and my question is, sir, uh, in a, in an ecosystem where a lot of, let's say, AI tool we are onboarding, right? So maybe it's a two-way perspective, right? From the company that there are 10 or 20 tools, and it has a different purpose. One for a loan, one for a customer service agent, right? So how do I scale, right? How do I scale the privacy governance, or let's say AI governance, right? Is there a standard framework, or should I ask the vendor to give me that information that, okay, these are the things? So I would like to understand what is your thought about it from as a consumer, Cars24, and as a provider, let's say. Let's say if I ask you that, okay, DPDP has come, now these are the 10 things that you need to do. Are you ready to support it depending upon different markets? So just your thoughts on it.
Sure. No, I think the vendor due diligence, and I think in the earlier session also someone asked, that obviously is something which has to be very robust. It's ultimately the fiduciaries and people who are responsible for the data who's accountable. So framework, I think it's the act. It's DPDP is not just on the fiduciary. It's applicable for everyone. And and that's how I would treat it, and I'm doing it, is I would replicate and at least expect what my standards of privacy and DPDP is how my vendor should be. Because if it is underserved, then it doesn't really match, our vendor's standard. Because there is a vulnerability, then there is a weakness in the whole privacy system. So I think vendor due diligence, and something which I always draw inference from RBI's outsourcing and all of those guidelines which the lenders is supposed to follow, the IT framework. They already talk a lot about the robustness on checking the vendors and who you are onboarding for your important task. And I think with DPDP now again, someone who's handling especially the PII data and all, I think you need to have the highest standard of what you are maintaining, at least ensuring that those data, at least, they may not be doing it for themselves, but at least the data which is shared with you, by you, needs to have the same sort of security standards, controls. So yeah, that's how I would say.
No, absolutely. I think just, I think Harsh answered it very well. Just one thing I want to add on, since you asked what happens if there are multiple solutions that we take from vendors and, who's responsible. First thing is, I think, yes, when you're onboarding these solutions, it's very important to do these checks in terms of what the vendor is telling you in terms of the compliance aspects, in terms of the governance aspects. More importantly, it is not static, right? Because models evolve, businesses change, and so on. So the onus is on you as the enterprise to keep these checks. Because ultimately, let's say if you're in a regulated environment, the regulator is going to come and ask you, hey, what are your vendor guidelines, right? How are you monitoring? So, so irrespective of what a vendor comes and tells you, it is very important for you to maintain that, which is also why it's important to streamline some of these things so that is unified across vendors, so that you don't keep replicating it every time you get in a new vendor, right? Like, so you unify it and then build from there.
We'll take one more question if there's someone has a question.
I think there's a hand there at the end.
Hi, Anjali this side. So this question in regard to the one of the use case that Harsh mentioned about the AI agent calling the users, right? So in that scenario, you mentioned that the agent might be capturing the mood, the tone of the users. So in that scenario, if the agent is mapping out that information, that would come under the purview of DPDPA under behavioral monitoring, right? And that would amount to profiling under that particular phone number. Then what do you think that if this scenario, we need to capture the consent? So what would be the approach for capturing that consent? So that is my question.
Okay. So I think first and foremost, let me clarify if I said, so what we do from the AI calling is people who are my customers, who I have consented or a transactional relationship with. So generally, or people who are under that 1600 series for everyone's, it's a service call or it's a transactional call. From the consent perspective, I am covered because it's something which customer had shown interest or was in my journey, and I'm just trying to facilitate and service it. Now, with respect to really understanding the feedback from the customer, AI calling agent generally has a set like a notes, or what you can say is a predictive question and a predictive answer. Based on the question, there will be an answer. So for that, I am, at least in my view, I'm not taking that as a personal information or it is something, a very service call based relationship where the customer who I've called has a decent consent with me to do a certain processing of our information. Calling which I do for collections, where a customer has, let's say, forgot to pay the EMI or a defaulted. Again, there are stages of collection calls. And based on the collection, I have told my agents to change the tone also. If they are a 7-day or 10-day or 30-day DPD, there is a stern voice which goes based on that. And the models are amazingly, they can learn and how, from whatever technology it is, they talk in that stern note. Again, it's not something which is beyond, like I'm drawing any consent or require, because this is a transactional call. So that's why I don't think there I'm kind of in a non-compliance or anything.
Okay. No, I was not saying about non-compliance. I was just, my question was in regard to profiling of the user.
Yeah.
Based on behavioral monitoring,
Yeah.
if we are capturing the tone or the mood of the user by the AI chatbot. So that was...
But I think still, even though if it's a profiling, like I said, it's a transactional call, based on that, at least I know the outcome that the customer is not willing to pay. So if now maybe I need to move, let's say if it's a collection case, I need to move my case from a soft AI calling to a hard call, where a customer ki jagah, the outsourcing collection agent or my collection agent will have to call now, because that feedback of that AI call will come to my collection dashboard where say that this person may default because of, let's say, the tone or the feedback which he has given.
Understood.
Okay. So thank you once again. And with that,
Thank you, Tridip, for moderating it so well. Thank you so much. Yes.
Well,
Thank you.
first of